Welcome to G-Day, live from the UGA Bookstore. This is DawgNation GameDay. Our coverage of the Georgia Spring Game is brought to you by Kroger and the UGA Bookstore. Now here's your host, Kaylee Mansell.
Dog fans, it has been exactly 100 days since Georgia football has taken the field anywhere. And even though it's felt like a lifetime, what a better place to take it than here in Sanford Stadium today for Georgia's annual spring game. Dog Nation, welcome into the Dog Nation Game Day show. I am Kaylee Mansell, and guys, I am just thrilled to be back talking about Georgia football, to have real football, and not even just talking about the speculation of the things that we heard from spring practice or from Coach Smart or from the players, but to actually be able to see these guys play today. I'm thrilled that we can bring it to you, and even if you can't be at the game or watching it on your television, we've got you covered here at Dog Nation, whether it's me here for pregame or Brandon Adams after the postgame. Today's just a day where we all celebrate the return of Georgia football and another season under Coach Kirby Smart. Today marks the day of truly turning the page, almost a new group this year, but still so much to be excited for. Here's what we've got going on today's Game Day show. Here in just a moment, we're going to bring on Dog Nation insider Mike Griffith, who's going to help us break down some of those key position battles that have been taking place over the spring and that Georgia fans are going to get a glimpse of today. Then, of course, we've got to talk about the quarterbacks. There is a quarterback competition going on. Kirby Smart told us so at the very beginning of the season. How does that play out today? And then we'll bring on the former Georgia quarterback, Jake Fromm, who's going to give us an insight on what it's like to compete for that spot and how can G-Day help those guys get prepared for what's to come. Then a lot of fresh faces today, whether it's the transfers that Georgia has brought in or the highly touted freshman group that Georgia fans will get to see for the first time today. We'll bring on Sentell to help break down who are those guys that can make an immediate impact and who are some of the freshmen that have flown under the radar that could make a statement today. Then, of course, we're going to bring on Connor Riley, who's going to give us a glimpse of what's going on inside of the stadium and what can the aftermath of G-Day be for the Dogs. With that, as I mentioned before, there's a new group this year, a lot of roster turnover, guys who went to the NFL or just didn't have any time left. You're going to see a new face at quarterback, whether that's Gunnar Stockton or Ryan Puglisi. And for a lot of Dog fans out there, you're a little bit unsure about what the future holds for the 2025 season. But Kirby Smart set the tone early on for what he wants to see out of those guys. Here's Kirby Smart from the first day of spring practice.
Yeah, I want to see the fire. I want to see the passion, the energy. I want to see who wants to be a good football player, who really cares about this game. Like, they care more about the game than they do about their NIL revenue stream. Like, if you really, really, really care about the game and you want to be good, it doesn't matter about any kind of money. It matters how I play the game. And more we're seeing across college football, the purest, the ones that care about the game the most, play the hardest. And usually the team that plays hardest wins. I know everybody thinks it's just whoever's more talented, but there's a whole lot to how hard you play and how much you care about it. So my goal is to find out, how hard do you want to play? How much do you really want to be great? Because if you do, it'll show by how you practice.
Mike, we just got the chance to hear from Kirby Smart early on about the fire and the passion that he wanted to see from his team this spring. I don't know what it's been about this spring in particular. Maybe it's just the way that college football has changed, but to hear Kirby Smart be that direct, there's been something a little bit different about him this entire spring.
Yeah, Kaylee, I think Kirby understands how college football has changed, and I think he wants to double down on maintaining that intensity and focus. And it was almost like he put the whole team on notice at the start of spring drills when he was saying, you know, the freshmen aren't in shape, and it's not just the freshmen, and there's older guys that need to be more coachable. So I thought Kirby kind of came out swinging. He realizes that there may not be a first-round pick on next year's team, and so this is going to have to be a team that wins games with that grit, that focus, that fire, and so he wants to set that tone. Now, all indications from the second scrimmage is he's getting it. Now, it'll be interesting to see if it carries over into G-Day in front of all the fans.
And hearing a comment like that, too, if you're a player and you hear that, I think that motivates you only more, because there's not a single person on this roster that needs to be comfortable with where they're at. There's going to be a lot of position battles that take place this year, and we'll get to the specifics of those in a minute. But we do have breaking news off the top of the show.
Look at that smile, and when it's not even about Georgia. Go ahead, Kay.
Well, a lot of people have complained about the way this year's spring game is playing out. You had to pay for tickets, and then it's not going to be televised. But I'm telling you, it could be a lot worse because Georgia could be walking in to the spring game today with no starting quarterback, unlike our Tennessee Vols from the north.
Yeah, and it's interesting because that's the first SEC game that Georgia plays. So, kind of a scary road game on the road against Nico Imaliava. Maybe.
Close enough.
Or maybe not.
More like Nico Imalivan?
Him too. And I was going to say, I was just starting to learn how to pronounce his name, and now he may not be in the league. Look, here's the deal. These guys are going to try to get market value. But this is the kind of business that needs to be handled behind closed doors. At some point, Carson Beck negotiated $4 million from Georgia, but we didn't hear anything about it. They did it right after Christmas. It was kind of hush-hush. Carson's trying to make his decision, i.e. negotiations were taking place, and they got it done early enough where Georgia was able to go in the transfer portal and get Trevor Etienne. So if Georgia doesn't handle those negotiations properly, no Etienne, no wins over Texas, no SEC championship. So now you're seeing how this element of the game is going to be very important for teams that want to win championships. So I look at Tennessee, and now here's a program that's raised the ticket prices with the luxury tax to pay for the players, and now they have their quarterback negotiating to get what looks to be a standard $4 million. And I looked at it like this. They beat Alabama, they beat Florida, and they made the playoff. That is a $4 million quarterback. And if you don't want to pay him, he will get $4 million somewhere else.
And that's the thing is with the way this spring portal works, he can't transfer within the SEC.
Right.
I've seen schools like USC, Oregon, Ohio State in the mix for Nico. But now you look at Georgia's first SEC game, which, of course, is on the road at Tennessee in a different way than we were talking about it before, because even though Georgia has had more success over Tennessee in recent years, when your first SEC game is on the road at Neyland Stadium, that's going to give some Georgia fans anxiety. But now with Nico no longer being there, maybe you feel a little bit better about that game than you did before.
Yeah, no doubt about it. And this is why Kirby is so careful about the type of player that he recruits. Because if it's all about money, it's all about money. It's not going to change when you put that helmet on. You don't want to put yourself in a position to be leveraged like this where one guy has this much power. Now, did Carson Beck have that much power and maybe not go as hard going into his senior year? Did Stetson Bennett, if we're going to be honest about it, before his final year at Georgia? That said, Stetson went undefeated, so nobody's complaining, right? Nobody's going, well, he didn't have a degree. Well, who cares? He's got 2 national titles, okay? Carson Beck, won an SEC, helped Georgia win an SEC championship and led an undefeated regular season. They performed. I don't think we need to worry about Gunnar Stockton holding out for any money, Kaylee.
No.
But the fact of the matter is these are the sign of the times. And this is what this free agency has created. And the fact that judge delayed the House versus NCAA settlement kind of kept it the wild, wild west. Because any deals that get done right now aren't subject to that cap. And that's what Kirby told us this was going to happen. He probably even knew about Nico when he said that. Usually when Kirby Smart tells you something, there's a reason.
Well, I think you made a good point earlier that this whole Nico drama has been so public. It's been reported on for the last couple of days, and Nico's dad tries to go on social media and say, hey, this isn't what is happening, but it was. So we'll go ahead and end the Nico conversation for now. I guarantee you with whatever Brandon Adams is going to say about this after the game, you're definitely going to want to tune in to watch that because he's going to have some choice words about the situation. But ultimately, we're here today because we're focused on Georgia football. So let's go ahead and get into some of those position battles that we talked about. I think we go ahead and start out at the cornerback position. Dalen Everett's spot is solidified. It's what's going on the other side of the field. You got 3 guys that are competing for the same spot, and Ellis Robinson, Daniel Harris, and DeMello Jones. Daniel Harris is the only one of these 3 who has started a game but doesn't have enough experience to go ahead and say, hey, that's my spot. The other guys are just backups. On the other hand, you have Ellis Robinson, a former 5-star, one of the highest-rated signees of the Kirby Smart era, but was just maybe a little bit small last year, so didn't get to see the field as much as Georgia Georgia fans wanted him to. But there's one other guy in the mix, and I think it's someone that we haven't talked nearly enough about this entire spring, and that's DeMello Jones. I think because you have someone like Ellis Robinson in the class, a guy like that's going to get lost in the mix. But don't forget that DeMello Jones was a 4-star top 100 cornerback. There's been a lot of chatter this spring about what he brings to the table too. So for these 3 guys, I think that you need to get the most out of your G-Day performance today to kind of help move you in that cornerback race a little bit.
Yeah, and I think that, they need to show they can play and that they can be a part of it, because DeMello Jones is a guy that a lot of other schools are probably contacting right now saying, hey, if you're not going to start here, we'll pay you so much money to go over there.
And it's probably one of the reasons that this game isn't televised, because you're going to have other schools attacking these Georgia players like vultures, like you said, someone like DeMello Jones.
No doubt about it. Now, the deal with Daniel Harris is he's got the size, he's got the length, but he wasn't always as physical as he needed to be, and he wasn't as sound of an open field tackler as he needed to be. Now, these are things I think that got coached up as the season progressed. Remember, at the beginning of last year, Kirby said, I got to coach up the bottom of the roster. A lot of those second, third teamers were the guys that transfer out and go start somewhere else. So you've got a big divide between returning starters with experience and a lot of these freshmen that could be pressed into action, like Daniel Harris was last year. So we kind of watched Daniel Harris grow before our eyes. It'll be interesting to see how far he's come. Ellis didn't grow before our eyes. He kind of stayed small, and too small to be effective in the open field. He wasn't able to take on those SEC backs effectively. And the last thing you want is to throw a guy like that out there and have him get an injury early in his career that could be, that could change the arch of his career. So I'll be interested to see how much bigger, stronger, more physical Ellis is today. I'll be interested to see how much usage DeMello gets. Is this a game where he has a decision to make if he wants to stay at Georgia or take a transfer out somewhere else, because he would be a prime target to start at an ACC or Big 12 school or even Big 10.
I think we've got a while before this position battle plays itself out, but what a lot of it is going to come down to is, because of what we didn't see last year, it's going to come down to who can make those tackles, because that was one of the bigger issues. So we'll have more on that after the show today on how these 3 play out. But if things don't happen for DeMello Jones, I do potentially see that as someone who's like, hey, okay, I got to go get my bag elsewhere and have that experience. All right, so let's go ahead and move on to the safeties. And for this topic, we're going to focus specifically on the transfer safety. So no Ja'Cory Thomas, no Kyron Jones. Georgia brings in 3 safeties from the transfer portal. Of course, you have Zion Branch on the one hand, who some of his career at USC lacked because he just dealt with injury. But I think this is the most versatile one out of all 3 transfers, because not only can he play in that safety role, but the star role as well. I don't expect him to be the starter, but maybe he's someone who can run really heavily with the twos just because he can play more than one position. Then you've got Adrian Maddox. Adrian Maddox is the most fascinating to me of this group, because he has more experience than just about any safety in the entire rim. And I'm not just talking about the transfers. I'm talking about between KJ and Ja'Cory too, but all of that was done at UAB. So how much of that skill set and that playing time transfers over when now you're coming to play at a bigger program like Georgia and against schools like the Texases and the Tennessees and the Alabamas? And then you've got Jaden Harris out of Miami. I think that one of these guys can really make the difference for Georgia. But to be honest, Mike, where things stand now, I feel like this is the position battle that we know the least about.
Yeah. So let's start with Maddox. A lot of people look at Maddox and say, well, he played at UAB. How does a UAB guy fit in at Georgia? Well, here's what you need to know. Florida wanted this guy bad. Georgia beat Florida for Maddox. So if the Gators were recruiting this guy and you got a guy they're recruiting, you weren't the only one in the mix. And the fact that it's kind of double jeopardy for Florida, right? Not only did they lose Maddox to Georgia, but that's a team that they play. So Maddox could come back and beat them. So that's big. I think he's a saucy player. I think he's a tough player. You mentioned the experience. I think he's a guy that early on has the edge of those 3 transfers. Jaden Harris is a Miami kid. I think he's got a high ceiling. But this is a guy that, maybe you need to kind of coach up, get in the system, not quite as much experience, obviously talented if he started out at Miami. So I like the ceiling there. I think this is a guy that kind of works his way in. And then you mentioned the versatility of Branch. And I think about Tyke Smith. And I feel guilty because we didn't give Tyke Smith enough love when he was here. his final year, he was probably the most productive defensive back on the Georgia football team, but everybody still had, Malachi Stars in all their eyes, right? But Tyke Smith was getting it done from a productivity standpoint. And you look at Tyke in the NFL right now, and he's kicking everybody's ass. So you need to have somebody that's going to be physical. You need to have somebody that's going to be versatile. Kirby loves how coached up the Branch brothers are. It's a football family. They get it. So I think Branch you're going to see on the field. Like you said, somewhere, certain situations, I like the upside. Clearly that Maddox brings, the saucy guy from UAB, you beat Florida to get him. And then, Jaden Harris, the kid from Miami, this is another guy, great athlete with a high upside. He's just going to need to get, Kirby-ized a little bit back there. Because, Kirby's all over this position coaching him up.
Exactly. Usually we're pretty child-friendly on this show, but I don't think that you could have described Tyke Smith in any better way. So I will accept that this one time. But that's your first warning.
I know. Every now and then I get a little too Mike, but
okay,
I can't help.
Passionate.
We're just talking football.
Yeah.
Yeah, we'll stop at that word.
All right, let's move on to the offensive side of the ball. We're talking about the running backs here, and not running back one. It's no doubt who running back one is, and that's Nate Frazier. But this is a position that's dealt with so much injury, not just last year, but the year before. So you got to have guys in place for that running back too. Robinsons are out of the equation at the moment just because of injury.
And say this is like 2 years without the Robinsons.
Yes.
This is a big deal. I mean, these are very valuable roster spots. When you've got two running backs that are out for 2 years, and Georgia must really love them, right? I mean, because they've had opportunities to go elsewhere also. But that's been a big hole that Kirby's had to coach around, not having Rod Robinson, who I thought, was going to be a real pile driver, big factor last year. Would have been a great combination with ETN. Who knows, maybe ETN doesn't get hurt because you're using him on the inside runs. Could have been a different season if you had Rod Robinson. Branson Robinson, to me, I mean, I know he looks good lifting weights, but I haven't seen it on the field yet. So far, he looks like a poor man's, Zeus to me. I mean, I just haven't seen it yet. Now, maybe it's there. Maybe he'll have a breakout year. But to this point, Branson Robinson has taken a roster spot and really hasn't delivered on a lot of the promise that we thought he'd have. So now, as you said, Kaylee, there are 3 other backs, though. 4 if you count Cash Jones.
I was going to say, we'll exclude Cash Jones from the conversation. That's a third down back. He'll be a G-Day star today, like always.
For
Feels
sure.
like a G-Day is always a Cash Jones moment.
And he was clutch last year. Cash Jones is another very underappreciated player when you look at what he did. But I want to get to the 3 guys you've kind of bullet pointed, because I think it's going to be important that 1 or 2 of these guys have a very good year.
Yeah, and it's interesting because in the 2025 class, Georgia only signed 1 running back. They were initially supposed to have 2. Then, of course, Usman Kroma decides that he's going to go to Florida State. So now you've got Bo Walker, who only a 3-star, but I saw him play. Super underrated guy. I think he finds himself in a similar position to what Nate Frazier was in last year, with because of injury, you're given an opportunity to get out there. But Bo Walker is already a little bit ahead of where Nate Frazier was last year, because Nate Frazier didn't even come until after the spring. Right. I've been really surprised with how much we've heard about Bo Walker this entire spring, even from Kirby Smart. That's a Kirby Smart type competitor, type hustler, type guy. And then on the other hand, you've got 2 guys who are part of the 2024 class. Of course, Georgia fans know Dwight Phillips Jr. from his touchdown against Florida last year. They call him Peanut. A little bit too small to be a running back, too. And then you've got Chauncey Bowen, too. We saw a little bit later in the season when injuries were still a thing. But from everything that we've heard from this spring, right now it looks like it's leaning Bo Walker.
Yeah, so Bo Walker, I've been told, is a lot like Dejon Edwards.
Yep.
And, before anybody disses Dejon Edwards, think about how valuable Dejon Edwards would have been last year to Georgia, right? Dejon was a productive guy. He was a consistent guy. He was a fall forward guy. He was going to get the yards that were there. He was able to hold on to the ball well. But I've heard Bo's kind of, a little smaller guy, powerful guy, kind of pinballs between the tackles. He's going to get the yards in there. He's got good vision, but again, a true freshman. So let's see how he looks in this scrimmage situation. You mentioned Peanut. That's a speed guy. He may be one of the top 2 or 3 fastest guys on the team. And when you've got a guy like that, that's great for gadget plays, right? The end arounds, the reverses, perhaps we see him in the return game somewhere, I'm not sure. And the fact that Kirby likes Chauncey Bowen says a lot, because I always like to point out, Kirby Smart was a running backs coach at Georgia. A lot of people don't know that, but when Kirby came back to Georgia and coached under Mark Richt, he coached running backs in 2005. So Kirby's got an eye, and as a defensive coordinator, he's had to break a lot of these guys down to defend. So I think Kirby Smart is a very good judge of talent at the running back positions, and the fact that he's held on to Bowens and said so many good things, I'm kind of waiting to see it. You mentioned, some of the injuries, but maybe we'll get a chance to see it in G-Day.
And one thing I do think we'll see today, too, is them use Dylan Bell in the running back position as well. I didn't include him on here, but he'll come up later on in our show, but that's someone who's also going to get in the mix at running back and wide receiver today. So one thing that we're asking all of our guests on today's show is, who's the one guy? Who's the one guy that by the end of this game, you're going to be writing a story about how well his performance was, maybe somebody that you want to shock you? Who's that guy for you?
Wow. Who's the one guy that I want? I'll be honest, I want to see Elijah Griffin. I've heard so much about him, and I know he's a defensive lineman, and knowing Kirby, he'll probably double Elijah Griffin all day just so he doesn't do anything because he likes to kind of put that carrot out in front. And I heard him earlier this week saying, everybody's comparing Elijah Griffin to Jalen Carter. Jalen Carter's one of one.
That's unfair, honestly.
Yeah, I mean, Jalen Carter is obviously a really special guy. But I think Griffin is too, in a different way. I no one's going to dominate the middle like Jalen Carter. I mean, Jalen Carter had a quality about him that's like Hall of Fame material. It literally changed games. But Griffin brings something as a true freshman with the athleticism. So far, everything I've heard about the character, he's able to play 3 different positions. His value is through the roof. So I don't know how much of him we're really going to see today. I think that's a guy you kind of want to protect a little bit. Like, all right, I've seen enough. You don't need to run him out there 30 plays. So I do want to see him, though. I want to kind of cast my eyes on him and say, all right, now I have an image of what this guy looks like in a Georgia uniform against Georgia-level competition. I'm not looking for the star, though, Kaylee. I'm looking at the quarterbacks. I got to be honest. I want to see how Gunnar Stockton has improved his release. I want to see how Ryan Puglisi gets through the progressions. I want to see these new receivers that I've heard about. They're telling me there's 4 or 5 guys better than what anybody put on the field, what Georgia put on the field last year. So I'm looking forward to seeing how the pass game clicks, and I'm looking forward to seeing how Gunnar Stockton has progressed with his release and his intermediate passes.
Yeah, so in just a little bit here, we are going to bring on the former Georgia quarterback, Jake Fromm, to talk about the quarterbacks a little bit. But for now, Mike, I want to thank you for your time.
When you bring on Jake, 2 years ago, Jake said that Gunnar was the guy that reminded him the most of himself. And that speaks volumes because I think Jake Fromm was a very underrated quarterback and a very underrated ambassador. The way he handled that job, when we look at the last couple of starters and some of the things that they said off the field and acted, you kind of wish they would have gone to the Jake Fromm school of quarterback ambassadorship. Can you just act like Jake Fromm did? And because Jake was such an outstanding representative for the university, and he still is. So I'm going to be really excited to see that segment because he gives really good juice and he really knows those guys. He can really break it down. He could be coaching one day. I know he's still got his career going, but Jake's a guy that I really listen to. I think he's really good.
And who knows better what it is to be like in the midst of a quarterback competition. So, Mike, we thank you for your time.
You bet. Thanks, Kelly.
All right, guys. So usually we are at Jittery Joe's for our pregame show, but today, as you can see, we're in a different location. We're actually at the UGA Bookstore where Braden typically does his postgame show. And here's the thing. You'll see all these people behind me. That's because there's autograph signings going on right now till 12 o'clock. If you're here on campus, you probably still have time to make it. Got Dan Jackson back there, Buck Bellew. We got here at around 9 o'clock this morning, and there were already people lined up all the way around the building to just get a glimpse of Dan Jackson. And even if you can't make it in time for the autograph signings, of course, you've got to come for the merchandise, the largest official UGA merchandise anywhere out there. I got a chance earlier to walk around and look at some of the new pieces. And with a new season, I would encourage you to get a new jersey or a nice new hoodie to mark the turning of the page. So make sure to come by the bookstore, whether it's right now before the game or to come after and be a part of Brandon Adams' postgame show, or just look and see what the bookstore has. So Mike did bring up the quarterbacks, which is obviously one of the main narratives that we're going to hear a lot about today. At the beginning of the season, Kirby laid it out on the line to begin with that, hey, there's a real quarterback battle going on between Gunnar Stockton and Ryan Puglisi. But a lot of us were quick to say, hey, we thought this was Gunnar's team the moment that the Sugar Bowl happened. And even though that may be the case, maybe the competition isn't as what it seems. In just a minute, we're going to hear from Gunnar Stockton on the competition itself, and then we're going to hear from Ryan Puglisi, kind of compare those two together to see, hey, maybe competing doesn't mean competing for spot one, but hey, maybe to elevate each other. Let's go ahead and hear from Gunnar Stockton himself on what it's been like competing with Ryan Puglisi.
Oh yeah, Ryan's a great guy. I think he's a good friend, and that's the thing about Georgia. I mean, there's going to be good competition everywhere, so and I wouldn't want it any other way. So, no, Ryan's a great guy, and he's a great player.
So I've had the chance to watch quite a few Gunnar Stockton pressers, and that's probably the biggest smile that I've seen him while answering a question. You can just tell that Gunnar loves to compete, and if you're coming here to Georgia, you know that's why you're here. We look at other quarterbacks in the past that maybe were committed to Georgia but ended up not coming in fear of having to compete for that spot. So even though Gunnar has the experience, he knows that the competition's never over here at Georgia. So now we're going to listen to Ryan Puglisi on what he said about competing with Gunnar.
Yeah, I mean, it's been great. I think that's why you come to Georgia, just to compete and get better no matter what, every single day. I mean, you hear the quote all the time of iron sharpens iron, so however way I can make Gunnar better and however way he can make me better. But I think overall, that's just why you come to Georgia, is to compete.
So pay attention to what Puglisi says right there about iron sharpening iron, even though there may not be an actual quarterback competition happening, because right now I do believe this is Gunnar's team. But in putting them in competition with one another, of course they're going to have to make each other better and bring out the best in each other as a quarterback if they do feel like they are competing. Gunnar's really good with his legs. Ryan Puglisi's got a terrific arm. If those two can work together and help each other out with their strengths, then you feel really good about what you have in a two-quarterback room that doesn't have the same experience as Carson and Gunnar did last year. I think Gunnar and Ryan bring two different things to the table, but by having them compete all spring long, of course, they're going to have to elevate their game to be able to showcase their best and put themselves in contention to be QB1. But here's the thing. In Ryan Puglisi's mind, there's a competition that's still going on. I thought Puglisi himself put this really well the other day on if he can still be quarterback one for the Dawgs.
I definitely think I can. I could right now, definitely. I think if you're in the quarterback position and you don't believe that you go play, you should probably do something else because you need some confidence.
He said you need to get some confidence. That's exactly what you want to hear out of a Georgia quarterback. When I first started covering football, I remember someone told me that when you're a quarterback, the type of confidence that you have to have is through the roof because, hey, you make a bad play, you got to be able to forget that and move on to the next. That's that quarterback mentality. And that's what you want to hear from Ryan Puglisi is that, hey, yeah, I still have a chance. So curious to see how Ryan Puglisi looks today, especially against the twos. We'll imagine that Kirby Smart will also have him run against the ones, so he'll have to compete with the best. But, of course, we'll provide all the updates and all the stats later on the Brandon Adams postgame show. As Mike said, there's no person who understands the situation of competing in the quarterback room better than Jake Fromm. So here's Jake Fromm on the Georgia quarterback battle and the new receivers. And here on the DawgNation GameDay show, it's time for our Kroger Fresh Take with the former quarterback Jake Fromm to talk all things G-Day. And honestly, at this point, it's crazy to even think that we're having a discussion about G-Day because it feels like just yesterday I was listening to you talk about the SEC championship and the playoffs. So the fact that we're even here just goes to show how fast time really does fly. G-Day looks a little bit different this year, not televised, you have to pay to get in. What do you sort of make of all the changes that have happened to G-Day this last year?
Yeah, honestly, that's new news to me. I didn't even know that it's not going to be televised. So, and that is like such an interesting twist about how these spring games are kind of changing. You know, are they going to get to kind of a model of playing other programs? You know, that's kind of been said and mentioned and kind of pushed for. So it's going to be so interesting to see this evolution of how the spring game changes. Some coaches, some programs kind of want to keep their cards close and not show what's going on, and others just really want to put on basically a show. So it's going to be kind of interesting to kind of hear the feedback of how this G-Day is. personally, G-Day coinciding with the Masters to me is never like great and ideal for timing. But it is what it is, and you got to do what you got to do sometimes.
Yeah, you mentioned that G-Day looks a little bit different just depending on the team. I mean, some teams aren't even having G-Day this year, but when you think about it from a quarterback standpoint, like, what's the thing that you get the most out of G-Day? Is it the crowd noise or just being in the stadium with a bunch of people? Like, what was the main benefit for you as a quarterback in playing the spring game?
Yeah, I mean, for me, it was another, especially in my later years, when I'm the guy, I'm going out there, I wanted to see the other guys in the huddle, and I wanted to see their eyes. I wanted to see if I could basically, trust them. How were they with the lights on in front of people? Was the moment too big for them, or were they locked in and ready to go make a play? So now for me, it was kind of already learning kind of which guys I could trust, which guys I could count on. It's kind of getting down to the nitty gritty of who's going to make a play for me and who I needed to get the ball to.
So a new season always brings some sort of new storylines. And unlike last year, this year, one of the main narratives is going to be who's going to be the starting quarterback. Is it Gunnar Stockton? Is it Ryan Puglisi? Of course, both of them will get a chance to showcase their skills on Saturday. But from what you've heard, your intel, like, how real is that quarterback battle?
Yeah, I mean, for me, I think this is 100% Gunnar's to lose. I think Gunnar's the guy. He's the guy who's been in the system for a long time. He knows kind of what it takes to be the quarterback at Georgia. He came in and had a phenomenal showing in the Sugar Bowl game. I mean, to me, this is Gunnar's job. And barring an injury or just absolutely, taking this game and having a really bad training camp, which I highly doubt. This is Gunnar's job, and I think for Puglisi, trying to push Gunnar to elevate his play, and then also trying to get the most reps he can. I mean, being a backup quarterback, I know from personal experience, you are one play away from being thrown into the mix and trying to take your team to new heights and new levels. So I think Kirby's always going to throw this competition narrative out there, and he really means it. He really does. He wants both of those guys to elevate each other. But I really think this is Gunnar's job.
Yeah, but for someone like Ryan Puglisi, I mean, could a good G-Day performance even matter? Is it more so what happens in the scrimmages in spring practice that has a bigger impact on the outcome?
Yeah, I think it definitely matters. It'll matter of how kind of how quick the leash is, or it really kind of earns a lot of respect with your teammates, in my opinion. When you go out in these games, these situations, these kind of unique opportunities, when you go out and play, and anytime you go out and play well, you earn respect from your teammates, from your coaches. And they'll be more inclined to trust you when your opportunity or when your number is called and when you get thrown into the mix. So it absolutely matters, especially for those two guys playing the quarterback position. Gunnar wants to go out and play well and execute and do all the right things, and Puglisi wants to go out and put on a show and put some pressure on Gunnar as well.
So in just a moment, we'll talk about some other position groups. First, of course, we have to give a shout out to Kroger. And when you work in sports, it's sometimes hard to remember like what time of the year it is. Time just flies by really fast. And I actually had the chance to go to Kroger yesterday, and I was quickly reminded that Easter is coming up because they had all the special candy out, whether it's like the Cadbury eggs or the really colorful M&Ms. It was a good reminder that Easter is coming up, and with that, you're going to need candy, you're going to need your hams, whatever you do for your feast. So you can do all of your fresh Easter finds at your local Kroger this year, from Easter feasting to basket building. Everyone will love fresh favorites from your local Kroger. So make sure to stop by your local Kroger or go to Kroger.com/Easter to find out more. So another one of the really exciting parts about this G-Day is the wide receiver group, because it was a little bit lackluster this year. So I think that everybody's just kind of ready for a fresh start. And whether it be the transfers that they brought in or some of the high school guys that they brought in, what's your intel on this new receiver group?
Yeah, I mean, for me, I want to see I actually want to see a vet who's been there kind of basically go out and kind of rebrand himself, and that's Dylan Bell. I want to see him go out and make a few splashy plays. I want to see a confident catcher, and I want to see a guy, just give me a little appetizer of what he could look like moving around and maybe playing different positions, throwing back there in the I formation, give him a toss sweep. I want to get a little appetizer. I just want to see a little something kind of what this guy can do with the ball in his hands. And I want to see the transfer wide receiver branch from USC. I want to see just kind of how flashy he is. Heard nothing but great things from him, and I cannot wait to see what he looks like on tape.
Yeah, from what we've heard this entire spring about Dylan Bell, he's been taking a lot of reps in spring practice, their running back position. So I'm curious to see like what glimpse we're going to get of Dylan Bell, of what he's been doing over the last couple of weeks. Now, when you look at G-Day's past, a great G-Day performance doesn't always translate over to who's going to be the star for the rest of the season. But when you think back on your G-Days, was there anybody that had like a stellar performance that would ultimately foreshadow a really good season?
No, well, G-Day for me, like the first thing that comes to mind is my good buddy Ben Cleveland. And I really hope I don't get in trouble here for saying too much, but Ben loved to get primed and ready kind of for the party afterwards of G-Day, kind of even before G-Day, the game got started. So, you know, Ben was always ready, and man, he was already having a good time kind of as G-Day, the game was going, and he was already ready for that party afterwards. If you kind of get my drift a little bit there. So that was just kind of quick. One of the G-Day memories that quickly comes to mind for me.
Yeah, you bring up a good point. How much is the food, like the dinner y'all get after? Because isn't it the winner gets steak and then the loser gets something else? Like, how much is the food an actual motivator for the team? Because, I mean, for me, that would be everything.
I mean, to me, it's always a big motivating factor for me, especially for the big guys up front. I mean, we're talking steak, crab, lobster. I mean, all the fixins. Talked to Jimmy at Striplin's. Apparently he's doing the food this year, and anytime Striplin's does it, I mean, it is just fantastic. So winners get steak and all the goods and all the fixins. Losers get the beanie weenies. Yeah, it's just never kind of what you want. So you always want that top 5-star meal.
All right, so last thing is, you mentioned you want to see someone like Dylan Bell. You want to hear good things about the performance that he had after it was over. Is there any other one player that you hope we're hearing good things about after the scrimmage is over?
Yeah, I also want to see this new and improved Oscar Delp, and I want to see kind of, I want to see this intent and this focus that he's kind of been talking about over the spring. I want to see it translate, show up on film and on the field. So excited to kind of see big things from him. Obviously, still trying to fill this Brock Bowers void that this Georgia offense has been left, and how kind of he fits as a piece there in the offense.
All right, Jake, as always, thank you so much for your insight and your time. We're always appreciative of it.
Yeah, thank you, Kaylee.
Reminder, even though G-Day will not be televised, doesn't mean you can't get a full breakdown on exactly what's going to happen today. To do that, you can tune into the DawgNation postgame show with Brandon Adams, who finally makes his return after a week of being gone. We'll have all the stats, all the players who performed well, and an update on how things went with the quarterback, so as well as highlights from the game itself. So make sure to tune in directly after the game for the Brandon Adams postgame show here at the Georgia Bookstore. Perhaps the group that people are most excited to see today and hear about is all these new pass catchers Georgia brought in. It's no secret that last year's pass catchers were an absolute liability, whether it was guys dropping passes or not having somebody that could go up for those 50-50 balls in the end zone. Georgia fans had a lot to say about that group, and Kirby Smart heard their cries. They immediately go into the transfer portal to address some of those issues. I actually thought that Brandon Adams touched on it really well in one of his episodes from DawgNation Daily this week. Here's Brandon's perspective on Georgia seeing a problem and coming up with a solution.
We just need as many good receivers as we can in the hopes of raising our offensive fortunes. Georgia took massive action to get a guy like that here, to get a guy like Zachariah Branch here. And now it hopes to reap the benefits on that.
So Georgia had clearly a massive issue, but it also knew what it needed to get done. There's a lot of flaws within the transfer portal system, but it does have some benefit, like being able to go get players who already have experience at the collegiate level. Georgia did that this year by bringing in Noah Thomas from Texas A&M, somebody with SEC experience, as well as Zachariah Branch from USC. When you look at Noah Thomas and when you look at him on the field today, you're going to know who it is, standing at 6'5". I know that there was maybe some miscommunication from me earlier this week, but no, he is 6'5". He gives you that 50-50 guy that Georgia was missing last year. I think what we all thought Colby Young was going to be, but ultimately things went down with Colby Young, so you didn't have that guy. Now you've got two of them, and on top of that, he was Texas A&M's leading receiver. When you can bring in a receiver that's got SEC experience, that's the most plug-and-play person that you're going to have in this entire group. I don't think at the end of the day that Noah Thomas is going to be having to battle for a spot. I think the spot is his as long as he can stay healthy. I'm excited to see what his stats will be after the game. Of course, we'll have some highlights from you. Then on the other hand, you've got Zachariah Branch, a former 5-star, the #1 wide receiver of his class. Zachariah Branch brings that speed that Georgia's going to be missing with Arian Smith. And a lot of the national media has said that Zachariah Branch will be the swing player for the Dawgs offense this year. So when you bring in two juggernauts like Noah Thomas, Zachariah Branch, two of the top guys in the portal at their position that can help what's going to be a really young group this year, makes you feel a lot better about what you've got at that position. And truthfully, I think that Georgia fans at this point are just more excited to see new pass catchers out there on the field. And on top of the transfers that they brought in, Georgia does sign a humongous freshman class of receivers. So we've got 4 to show you today. There is a 5th one, Thomas Blackshear, but he did not enroll early, so we'll be excluding him from the conversation for that reason, as well as Tyler Williams. Tyler J. Williams is injured. Georgia fans won't have the chance to see him today. But, of course, it all starts with a 5-star wide receiver, Talon Taylor, the first 5-star receiver that Georgia has signed since George Pickens. Here's the thing about Talon Taylor. In watching his gameplay, senior year of high school, over 1,600 yards and 24 touchdowns. There's not one particular thing about him skill set wise that stands out amongst the rest. He really is a do-it-all guy. And one point that Connor Riley and I had brought up on DawgNation at Large this week is I think Georgia fans were a little bit upset that they didn't have their own Ryan Williams, Jeremiah Smith, Cam Coleman. Can Talon Taylor be that guy for the Dawgs? Hopefully we'll have more on that today. Then someone I don't want Georgia fans to completely overlook because there is a big name like Talon Taylor is the 4-star wide receiver CJ Wiley. 247 actually compared him to a guy like Noah Thomas. He does stand at 6'4", senior year of high school, over 1,100 receiving yards, and he won a state championship. So this may not be the year for CJ Wiley. He may be more of a next year guy, but I don't want Georgia fans to overlook the immediate impact that he can make if the opportunity is given to him. And then, of course, you've got Landon Roldan, who is a very local kid, also a state champion. A lot of people are comparing him to Ladd. He does have that 4.4 speed. We know that G-Day sometimes has performers that don't always go on to have a terrific season because they don't have that much playing time. But I think that Landon Roldan can be one of the guys that has a great G-Day performance today. So even if you've got a crop of freshman receivers that don't come in and make an immediate impact, they're laying the foundation for what's to come because Georgia's setting themselves up for short-term success, but also long-term success with this group. And then since we're on the subject of pass catchers, we have to talk about the 2 tight ends that Georgia brings in as well. Those are going to be Elias Williams, the 5-star, who's going to be 6'7", who can play as a tight end or as a receiver. I imagine that Georgia will use him in both roles today to see what they've got in him. But somebody that Jeff Sentell has put a lot of stock into that's not Noah Thomas is Ethan Barbour, the 4-star tight end who's a great blocker, also a great pass catcher. He's got really good instincts, is a Kirby Smart type guy like the Bo Walkers and the Ethan Barbours, super coachable. So I imagine that all these pass catchers, they're going to try to find to get the ball to them somehow, some way today, just to see a little bit more clearly what you've got in that group and to help us get a better understanding of the new pass catchers that Georgia has brought in. Let's hear from Jeff Sentell on Sentell's Intel.
And it wouldn't be a game day show without Sentell's Intel, the first one of the year. On the screen here, we just showed the 4 wide receivers from the 2025 class that are early enrollees. There's been a lot of hype around them, especially guys like Talon Taylor, CJ Wiley. But Georgia also brings in so many big players from the transfer portal. What's the likelihood that these guys are actually going to see the field?
Yeah, a lot. I would say, Kaylee, that Talon Taylor and CJ Wiley probably already in the top 6. It feels like, and that's with some big names as well, like Sokovie, Dylan Bell, Zachariah Banch, Noah Thomas, Colby Young, maybe top 7. Talon is going to have rare separation skills, and one of the things you just look about, everybody's going to color their beliefs around the play caller or the quarterback or the plays, but like these are guys that can get open, and they're just simple man beaters, Kaylee. And that means I don't care what you call, I'm going to get separation, and I'm going to get green grass between me and the defender. And Georgia's just going to have a bounty of guys. Like, for example, you get C.J. Wiley out there maybe, or you get Talon Taylor out there. They're probably going to draw the 3rd or 4th best DB on the field for the opponent. That's going to be a problem. That's going to be a real big problem, especially as those guys get older and more acclimated. And I think, Kaylee, those guys have to hit. They're talented enough to hit and play right away. But, there's a reason why they were rated. Again, guys, it's just really simple. Recruiting makes it simple, but these are top 100 prospects. Georgia hasn't signed any of those guys to play the receiver position since 2020. And that's when they brought in Arian Smith, Jermaine Burton, all those guys. So this is different, especially when you look at Talon, who's a 5-star. Kaylee, the 5 stars are not earned easy. Talon was a guy that was rated the highest of any Georgia receiver since GP in 2019. Ohio State wanted this guy. Georgia's got an Ohio State receiver on their team now.
When I think back to this time last year, the freshmen that we were talking about were KJ Bolden, Ellis Robinson, Justin Williams. Georgia had signed so many high-profile recruits, but this year I feel like the one that everybody's just waiting to see what he looks like is Elijah Griffin. He's going to be put on full display today. Georgia fans are going to know exactly who he is.
He might have, Kaylee, the freight train of hype could get even crazier. Like, let's say he has 2 TFLs. Let's say he has a sack or 2. Let's say he just is constantly knifing into the backfield. That's what should happen, Kaylee. Like, who keeps saying it over and over? You see Warren Brinson say it. You see other players say it now. Like, the hype is indeed real. I think he's got a great worker mindset to him as well. And, Kaylee, he just looks like a guy that should already be a sophomore at Georgia. And he is a true freshman early enrollee. Number 1 for everybody, Kaylee. Lots of times the recruiting services, they kind of differ a little bit about who's the number 1 DT. There was no discussion. There was a clear consensus for Elijah Griffin. He's a 9-1-2 dog from the Coastal Empire in Savannah. I've seen him play a bunch of times. I just can't wait to see Elijah on the line where somebody else might draw the double and not him, or the triple and not him.
When I think about other big names, we have Elijah Griffin, Isaiah Gibson, Elias Williams, the higher star recruits in the class, but is there anybody that could surprise DawgNation today? Maybe somebody under the radar that we haven't talked about as much.
Do you mean freshman-wise or just anybody?
Freshman-wise, because even though Bo Walker's not really one of the higher-rated kids, we spent a lot of time talking about him just because of what we've heard about him from spring practice. Is there anybody who's just flown super under the radar that might surprise some people?
Yeah, I think I'll fire at some flags with a few of these. I think Bo Walker will probably be the second most impressive back at G-Day. I think that, not a lot of juice has came out on him. I kind of look for, we must do a better job because I think we do a better job of talking about C.J. Wiley and Talon Taylor. But Georgia also brought in Landon Roldan at wide receiver. He already made a big play in a scrimmage. And there's Elias Williams, the 5-star tight end. There's the 5-star linebacker, Zayden Walker. But I really, really like Ethan Barbour a lot. Like, if you had to say, Jeff, who's the most likely freshman to get a touchdown at G-Day? My 2 stakes bets would be Ethan Barbour or Bo Walker. I think both of those guys have what it takes. I mean, you know, Georgia signed more receivers than just CJ and Talon. They have more pass catchers when you extend the depth, what they have at the tight end spot with both of those guys. And I mean, Kaylee, Ethan is just an absolute winner. Everything he does, he wins.
And he's arguably the best golfer on Georgia's team, as we learned today.
Yeah, if you see the social media clip from this chip-in challenge, Ethan Barbour has been on the links before, and he's the guy at the end that was their finishing shining moment out of all the dogs. Now, Oscar Delp did good. A lot of other guys did good, but you know, sometimes I want to kind of cheat a little bit with your freshman answer, because technically DeMello Jones and Ellis Robinson the fourth, they're redshirt freshmen as well. So, like, you know, the cupboard is going to be pretty good. But another sleepy guy, Kaylee, another sleepy guy is, I don't know if he will have juice turned all the way up this G-Day, but I think next G-Day, Chase Linton.
Oh, yeah. I agree.
You're going to hear his name a lot in terms of that guy's going to be just about ready in terms of what's going on. And, you know, Georgia's going to play a lot of quarterbacks. And I'm going to tell you, Georgia will probably show him. I continue to hear great reports about the preferred walk-on quarterback, Colt Ginn. Colt Ginn looks good. He's been grown up. He's a state champion quarterback in Georgia football. And you got to think, who's the number 3? Like, yeah, everybody wants to know who's the number 1. How's Pug come along competing with Gunner? But, you know, Georgia also signed Ryan Montgomery and Hezekiah Malinder Hale, 2 other quarterbacks as well in the 2025 class. So there's going to be a lot of names to watch. And, you know, just one sneaky thing I don't think people realize, I think Sokovia is really going to be a fan favorite as well.
Did you know that I took him as my first pick in the G-Day fantasy draft?
Did you?
I did.
Who did you have a G-Day fantasy draft
Me and
with?
Connor did it yesterday.
Who was Connor's first pick?
He actually took Dylan Bell for his first pick, because his point was that Dylan Bell can be used as a receiver or a running back, so it'd probably get him some extra points. But I took Sokovia.
Always that Connor, playing the odds, playing the game, running through some calculations in that brain of his. The beautiful mind working right there. I mean, I just think Sokovia is, I mean, everybody's going to watch Zachariah Branch. That would probably be my first pick in any of the G-Day picks, because he might take a punt back. He might take I don't know if the punts will be live, so that takes that away, but he could probably take a bubble. I know everybody likes Mike Bobo when Coach Bobo calls a screen. And he could also make, I mean, some of the reports I've got about Zachariah Branch, it's going to be cool. What do you think DawgNation will end up calling him?
Z Breezy.
Z Breezy. There you go. That sounds cool. But for me, the reports consistently have come from spring ball. Unguardable. Georgia has nobody that can move like that. Going to be a problem. Good luck. Like, that's what I've seen for Zach Branch, Z Breezy. But also you got Sokovia, who will be rocking, I believe for the second time. I'm told his adoption finally went through. He'll be rocking the white Helton jersey. Such a great story, such a great family, such a good story going on right there, how he wanted to honor a family that has adopted him and brought him in, and coming up in Cass High School. And I think he is one of the most respected members of the Georgia football team, and rightfully so.
Thanks, Jeff. We'll check back in with you on the Brandon Adams postgame show. So we've gotten to hear everybody else talk about the players that they're most excited to see, or the ones that they want to perform well today. But now it's time for me to do my impact players of the game. And I selected these very carefully. We're going to start with Dylan Bell. I remember this time last year when we were having G-Day, the conversation was, who's going to be the go-to wide receiver for Carson Beck? I think a lot of people assumed that it was going to be Dylan Bell, because we saw really good glimpses of him from the 2023 season, but Dylan just didn't go on to be that guy. He's not big enough to go up for the 50-50 balls in the end zone, and he did struggle with being able to hold on to some passes this year. But I think what we've learned about Dylan Bell from the spring is that he is perhaps the most versatile player that Georgia has on offense right now. He can play in the wide receiver role as well as running back. They had him playing in the running back slot at some points last year. But I think that this is going to be a new Dylan Bell, kind of forced to be a leader in this group of pass catchers that either have just come in from the transfer portal or are true freshmen. So Dylan Bell's got to be the leader in that room. But now with his new role for Georgia as a receiver and as a running back, I think we're going to see a different Bell this year, especially just because Georgia's going to use him in a different way. And today, I hate to say it because Connor did take him in our GDay fantasy draft, this is someone who's probably going to rack up a lot of fantasy points just because he can do a lot of things. So I think what Dylan Bell does today, how Georgia uses him, is going to foreshadow a lot of the type of player that we're going to see Dylan Bell be for the Dogs in 2025. Then let's go ahead and move on to the defensive side of the ball. I'm taking Chris Cole here, even though he only played in that third down back role for Georgia last year. He has to take a massive step forward. Georgia loses so many guys in that linebacker room, and everything we've heard about Chris Cole, how smart he is, how instinctive he is, his role is only going to dramatically increase this year. And two, he's got the most experience as a true freshman on the defensive side of the ball, apart from KJ Bolden, is going to have to step up, play a bigger role this year, and is going to have to lead a lot of these younger guys and the new guys that they've brought in. So all my stock this year is put into Chris Cole, and I cannot wait to see what this season holds for him. And then lastly, you got to double down on your opinions. I took Sakovi White with the first pick of the DawgNation GameDay fantasy draft. I think because of everyone that Georgia has brought in between Noah Thomas, Zachariah Branch, then you've got your Talon Taylors and your CJ Wileys. I think that sometimes we forget about the guys that Georgia brought in last year, Sakovi White being one of them. But this is someone who had a touchdown last year on GameDay. He may not be the star wide receiver for Georgia this fall just because of his size, but there are sometimes those GameDay stars, like we said before, that just have a really good spring game. So I expect that out of Sakovi White today, and Mike Bobo's definitely going to find a way to get Sakovi in the mix because he is a natural born leader, and I do think that he's helping with the direction of some of these guys that Georgia has brought in. So you got to double down on your opinions, and that's what I'm doing about Sakovi White. That's my impact players for today. Again, I know you can't see it on your television, but we're going to have highlights after the game with Brandon Adams, as well as give you all the stats from everything that happened today so it can make you feel like you were here at GameDay with the rest of DawgNation. And, of course, that's going to happen right after the game, so you can tune in on whatever platform you watch. Or if you're here in Athens, come join us at the UGA Bookstore where you can come up and give your opinion on everything with Brandon Adams. So this is the first day of a really long stretch of what is going to be the Georgia football season. And even though last year may not have ended in the way that a lot of us hoped, today we turn a new page. I feel really good at what Georgia has at the quarterback position, whether it is Gunnar Stockton or Ryan Puglisi. The fact that you have options makes you feel a lot better about that room in general. And I think that Jeff brings up a really good point about who's going to end up being the number 3, because even though Georgia does bring in guys in the 2025 class, Colt, again, is not someone that should be overlooked in this group. And when you have a coach like Kirby Smart, it doesn't matter how much turnover there is or how many guys leave or how many guys you bring in. He's the best coach in college football, and each season there's always going to be a chance for the Dogs to win it all with Kirby Smart at their head. So today we turn a new page, a new Georgia team, but still that same excitement. And here at GameDay, of course, it is a tradition like no other.